I'm still traumatized by what happened to me that night. Even after all this time, I haven't gotten over it. The nightmares keep coming back, and now, with the viral Hawk Tuah girl plastered all over the internet, it feels like I'm reliving it all over again. It all began years ago. I was a regular at this local bar near my apartment. It wasn't anything fancy, just your typical spot where people went to drink, forget, and maybe find some company. Every weekend, my friends and I would gather there, throwing back drinks until we were too hammered to walk straight. Thankfully, the bar was just a quick 5-minute bus ride away, so I never had to worry about driving home drunk. That night was no different, at least at first. I met up with my buddies around early evening, and we got right into it, ordering rounds of shots and beers like we didn't have a care in the world. The goal was always the same: get drunk, hit on girls, and see who could get lucky. But from the start, things felt off. Maybe it was the fact that every girl I approached shot me down without hesitation. I was wobbly, slurring my words, and spilling my drinks like an idiot. I'd walk up to a girl, flash my best drunk grin, and get shut down before I could even finish saying, "Hey." My friends, on the other hand, seemed to be doing just fine. They were dancing, laughing, and even swapping numbers with girls. By midnight, I'd given up. I sat at the bar, drowning my sorrows in more drinks while my friends basked in their victories. My confidence was in the gutter, and I was too drunk to care. All I wanted was to get out of there. When the clock struck 2 a.m., I stumbled outside, heading to the bus stop. Most people at the bar had either gone home or were waiting for Ubers. Not me. I was broke, and the bus was the cheapest option. The street was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. I sat down on the cold bench, staring at the empty road, hoping the bus would show up soon. That's when I saw her. She was stunning, easily the most beautiful girl I'd seen all night. Long dark hair, piercing eyes, and a confident air that made her stand out. She looked like she didn't belong at some dingy bar. What was a girl like her doing at a bus stop this late? I wanted to talk to her, but after a night of constant rejection, I couldn't bring myself to risk another blow to my ego. So, I sat there in silence, pretending not to notice her, even though I couldn't stop glancing her way. Then she spoke. "Rough night?" Her voice was smooth and almost teasing. I froze, unsure of how to respond. Yeah, kind of," I mumbled, feeling like an idiot. To my surprise, she smiled. "You look like you enjoy rough nights." I laughed nervously. "Yeah, I guess you could say that." She kept talking to me, and somehow, I managed to hold a conversation. She was flirty, laughing at my dumb jokes, and for the first time that night, I felt like maybe things were turning around. Maybe my luck wasn't so bad after all. After a few minutes of chatting, she sighed dramatically. "Is this bus ever going to get here? We've been waiting forever." "Yeah," I said. "It's taking way too long." She leaned in closer, her smile turning mischievous. "Well, since we have the time, maybe we can make the most of it." Her words caught me completely off guard. Was she suggesting what I thought she was? My mind raced, and before I knew it, I blurted out, "Yeah, sure." She stood up, grabbed my hand, and led me toward a nearby alley. My heart was pounding, a mix of excitement and disbelief. But as we reached the alley, something felt wrong. The air felt heavier, colder. The way she moved seemed almost unnatural, like she wasn't quite human. My drunken mind tried to dismiss the unease, chalking it up to too much alcohol. We returned to the bus stop afterward, and she sat next to me, her gaze fixed on the dark road ahead. Then she touched my shoulder. "Are you okay?" Her voice wasn't hers anymore. It was deep, masculine. I turned to look at her, and my stomach dropped. The face staring back at me wasn't the beautiful girl I'd been talking to. It was a man's face, a man wearing her clothes. I stumbled back, my breath coming in short gasps. "What the hell? Are you okay?" the voice repeated, calm and unsettling. Panic took over. My mind screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. The thing, kept staring at me, its expression unreadable. And then something inside me snapped. Without thinking, I pulled a knife from my pocket and lunged at it, screaming like a madman. I don't remember much after that. Just flashes of blood, the sound of my own screams, and the thing's laughter echoing in my ears. I ran home, trembling and drenched in sweat. For days, I hid in my apartment, too terrified to step outside. But it didn't matter. The police eventually found me. Surveillance footage and a witness had sealed my fate. I didn't resist when they arrested me. I couldn't. The guilt, the fear, it was too much to bear. Now, every time I see the Hawk Tuah girl online, it all comes rushing back. Her face haunts me, reminding me of that horrifying night and the monster that ruined my life. This story was inspired by a horrifying incident regarding a 25-year-old man who has been charged with taking out a woman after she apparently made him feel suspicious. In all my years, this has been the most disturbing thing that has ever happened to me. Recently, I've been constantly reminded of it by that vulgar Hawk Tuah girl who went viral. I always thought I'd be the kind of person who'd want to keep up with what the younger generations were doing, but this incident has made me completely rethink that decision. I'm an older man, and at the time this happened, I was 65 and recently retired. My wife had passed away years earlier, and with no work to distract me, the grief and loneliness of her absence overwhelmed me all over again. I didn't have any children left at home. They'd all grown up and moved out long ago. After trying and failing to pick up a few hobbies, I finally realized the only thing that might help was to stop being alone. Eventually, I decided to try online dating. I signed up for one of those apps meant for older people and went on a few dates. Most of them were uneventful, but then I met a woman who made me feel alive again. Before long, we became serious and she moved in with me. Neither of us were particularly outgoing, so staying home most days suited us fine. We found comfort in each other's company, spending most of our time together watching television. From VHS tapes and DVDs to cable and Netflix, we consumed everything. We even understood the modern term Netflix and chill, though I'd hardly expected it to become such a frequent part of our relationship. The problem wasn't the Netflix, it was the chill part. My girlfriend took it far more seriously than I ever anticipated. I let her move in because I was desperate for companionship, but she, on the other hand, seemed desperate for something entirely different. Her libido was far beyond mine, almost insatiable. I tried to keep up, but I wasn't physically capable. My heart could take it, but the parts of me that mattered just weren't cooperating. Her frustration grew as our nights together became a pattern. She would try to engage me, and I would inevitably fail to meet her expectations. One evening, her irritation boiled over. "Are you serious?" she snapped. "I've been at it for 15 minutes and nothing?" "I'm sorry," I stammered, feeling a pang of guilt. "I'm trying, but I just can't do it." "Is it because you're still hung up on your dead wife?" she demanded. "Or is it because I took off my dentures?" No, it's nothing like that," I protested. But the words felt hollow. "Oh, come on. You wrinkly sack of expletive. They make pills for this, you know?" "I never thought I'd need them," I admitted quietly. "Newsflash, you need them now," she said sharply. "Go to the doctor tomorrow." "What a waste of some gummy Hawk Tuah." She stormed off to the bedroom, muttering under her breath. As usual, I slept on the couch that night. The sting of her words lingered, but I couldn't deny that she was right. If I didn't do something, I'd likely end up alone again, and that was a fate I couldn't bear. The next morning, I swallowed my pride and made an appointment with my doctor. He didn't ask many questions before prescribing the pills, as though he could see the desperation written all over me. That afternoon, I picked up the prescription and returned home. I told myself I'd give it a try that evening. When nighttime came, we followed our usual routine. Dinner, TV, and then the unspoken tension that always seemed to hang in the air. As my girlfriend settled on the couch, I discreetly took one of the pills and sat down beside her. We watched a few shows together, and about 20 minutes later, I began to feel a noticeable change. Even she could tell something was different. A few minutes later, she made her usual suggestion. This time, I didn't hesitate. For the first time in a long time, I felt confident, almost youthful. I agreed, and what happened next must have been so overwhelming that I blacked out. The last thing I remembered was the sound of the TV in the background and her saying, "Hawk Tuah," imitating that viral meme girl. When I came to, the room was eerily silent. I looked around and saw my girlfriend on the floor. Her face was blue. Her eyes rolled back in her head. Panic surged through me as I rushed to her side, shaking her and calling her name, but she didn't respond. Desperately, I called 911 and began administering CPR, my hands trembling with every compression. The paramedics arrived quickly, but it was already too late. She was gone. The investigation into her death yielded no definitive answers. The coroner speculated that it might have been a heart attack or a stroke, possibly brought on by the stress of temporary asphyxiation. There was even a suggestion that she might have choked during the encounter. Regardless of the cause, I couldn't escape the feeling that it was my fault. I was charged with involuntary manslaughter, and for months, the weight of that accusation consumed me. Miraculously, I was acquitted. The jury deliberated for hours before delivering their verdict, and though I was free, I felt anything but. The guilt was, and still is, inescapable. Years have passed since that terrible night, and my life has only grown lonelier. I thought I'd finally begun to move on, but then, out of nowhere, I saw that viral video. The sound of that girl's voice, Hawk Tuah, brought it all rushing back. It's a sound I will never forget, no matter how much I wish I could. This story was inspired by a deeply disturbing incident involving a 65-year-old man named Richard Henry Patterson, also known as the Margate Man. Patterson initially claimed that his girlfriend had choked to death during an intimate encounter. However, the details surrounding her death were murky, unsettling, and riddled with unanswered questions that cast a sinister shadow over the entire case. The night in question was ordinary at first, or so it seemed. Patterson's neighbors later described him as a quiet, unassuming man, the kind you'd hardly notice. But behind closed doors, something far darker was brewing. When his girlfriend was found lifeless, Patterson's explanation to authorities raised more questions than answers. He insisted her death was accidental, but the circumstances were far from straightforward. The autopsy revealed no conclusive cause of death, which only fueled the mystery. Was it really an accident, or was there something more sinister at play? The lack of clear evidence didn't stop authorities from pursuing Patterson with second-degree murder charges. As the case unfolded, the courtroom was filled with speculation, unease, and conflicting emotions. The trial was nothing short of chilling. Prosecutors painted Patterson as a man whose actions were deliberate, accusing him of causing the death in a fit of passion. Meanwhile, the defense argued that it was nothing more than a tragic accident, a misunderstanding of circumstances that spiraled out of control. As the jury listened to testimony after testimony, the weight of the decision was palpable. People in the courtroom whispered anxiously, their eyes darting between Patterson and the legal teams. 5 tense hours passed as the jury deliberated, sifting through every shred of evidence and argument. Finally, the verdict was announced, not guilty. Shock rippled through the courtroom as gasps and murmurs filled the air. Some were relieved, believing justice had been served, while others felt the decision left justice hanging in the balance. Even with his acquittal, the unsettling nature of the case lingered like a dark cloud, leaving many to wonder what truly happened that night. This true story serves as a grim reminder of how fragile and unpredictable life can be. Sometimes, the truth remains elusive, buried beneath layers of doubt, suspicion, and silence. It leaves us with an unsettling question. What really happened in the Margate man's home that fateful night? Ever since the recent video of that Hawk Tuah girl went viral, I've been reminded of what happened to me a few years ago. The resemblance was uncanny. She looked almost identical to a girl I once knew. It was late one evening, and I was driving home after visiting some relatives. The road was pitch dark, and the quiet felt unnervingly heavy. I decided to stop at the nearest gas station to fill up before heading home. As I pulled in, I noticed a young woman walking out of the gas station alone. She looked cold and lost, her small frame illuminated under the harsh fluorescent lights of the station. Against my better judgment, I pulled over and rolled down my window. "Hey, you all right?" I asked, trying to sound as casual as possible. "Oh, I'm fine, thanks," she replied, though her tone was uncertain. "A girl like you shouldn't be out here alone on a road like this at night." "Let me help you out," I insisted. "There are a lot of scumbags around here. It's not safe." She hesitated, her eyes scanning me with suspicion, but after some convincing, she finally relented and got into the passenger seat. For the first few miles, I tried to lighten the mood, breaking the awkward silence with small talk. I asked her what had brought her to the gas station at such an odd hour. She told me she had been at a friend's house and decided to head home on her own. Her words were clipped, guarded, as though she didn't want to reveal too much. As we drove on, we approached a junction where she pointed out the turn that led to her house. But instead of turning, I continued driving straight, toward the outskirts where I lived. She noticed immediately and started shifting nervously in her seat. "Hey, I think you missed my turn," she said, her voice tinged with unease. I didn't respond. "Hello? My house is the other way. You need to turn around," she said more firmly, her voice rising in panic. "Be quiet," I snapped, my tone cold and unyielding. The car went silent, save for the hum of the engine. That's when she realized what was happening. Her breathing quickened, and her voice became frantic. "What are you doing? Let me out of this car. Stop the car right now," she screamed. I ignored her, gripping the wheel tighter as I drove. When her shouting turned into frantic movement, I reached into my pocket, pulled out a knife, and held it up to her. "Calm down," I hissed, the blade glinting in the faint light. Her eyes widened in terror, and she froze, her entire body trembling. The rest of the drive was silent except for her muffled sobs. When we finally arrived at my house, I drove into the garage and parked. I turned off the engine and unbuckled my seatbelt, glancing at her pale face one last time before stepping out of the car. She tried to make a run for it, but I was faster. Grabbing her arm, I yanked her out of the car. She kicked and screamed, her voice cracking as she begged for mercy, but I hoisted her over my shoulder like she weighed nothing and carried her into the house. The basement was where I put her. It was a soundproof, cold concrete room with only the barest of amenities: a bed, a chair, and a single dim light bulb hanging from the ceiling. It wasn't much, but it was all part of the plan. I didn't chain her up. I didn't need to. There was no way for her to escape, and whenever she tried, I was always stronger. For a while, everything was perfect. I had her to myself. She resisted, of course, but I found that a few well-timed threats were usually enough to bend her will. Those evenings were euphoric for me. Everything I had always wanted, right there in my grasp. But then, one night, everything changed. When I went down to check on her, she wasn't crying or screaming like before. Instead, she sat there, calm and quiet. Her eyes locked onto mine with an unsettling intensity. "Oh, poor little thing," I said mockingly, breaking the silence. "Don't be sad. You know I'm going to let you go someday, right? Just not today." Her expression didn't falter. "I'm sorry I had to do this to you. I really am," I continued, pacing the small room. It's been too hard to get a girl to stay with me. So I had to borrow the company of a girl like you from the world, just for a little while." Still, she said nothing. "Look, it's not all bad," I added, crouching down to meet her gaze. "I can provide for you. I'll keep you safe. All I ask is for one little thing in return." Finally, she spoke, her voice calm and steady. "Take it easy. Don't make me hurt you. I don't want to, but I will." I chuckled, leaning back. "You're not going to hurt me. And why's that?" "Because you know what I want," she replied, a faint smile curling her lips. "Oh, and what's that?" I asked, intrigued. "The same thing that makes all men go crazy," she said, her tone almost playful. "The one thing we haven't done yet. You know what I mean." Her words disarmed me. I hesitated, then stepped closer. "Well, if you say so," I muttered. "But could you tone it down with the creepy vibes? It's kind of killing the mood." "Don't worry," she said, her smile widening. "It's all part of the fun." And then, faster than I could react, she lunged. Her teeth sank into me, and I screamed, stumbling backward. The pain was excruciating, unlike anything I'd ever felt. Blood gushed from the wound as she spat out a piece of me onto the floor. Before I could recover, she grabbed the knife I had left nearby and slashed at me. I collapsed, writhing on the ground, helpless as she bolted up the stairs and out of the house. She ran down the road, screaming hysterically, banging on doors and begging for help. Eventually, she stumbled into a Waffle House, where the staff called the police. Hours later, they found me in a pool of my own blood. At the hospital, doctors tried to reattach what she had bitten off, but the damage was too severe. All I have left is a stump, a cruel reminder of my failure. But the worst part isn't the physical pain. It's the sound, that haunting, mocking sound she made before it all went wrong. Hawk Tuah. This story was inspired by a horrifying and chilling incident involving a kidnapped woman who displayed extraordinary bravery in the face of terror. The victim reportedly bit off her attacker's private part after being held captive at knife point, an act of survival that shocked everyone and ultimately led to her escape. The man behind this heinous attack was identified as 61-year-old Dennis Slayton, a registered offender with a history of multiple convictions. The terrifying ordeal began when Slayton offered the woman a ride at a patrol station in Greenville. She had asked to be dropped off at a specific location, trusting that he would honor her request. However, her trust was cruelly betrayed. Instead of taking her where she needed to go, Slayton threatened her with a knife and drove her to his home, a place where she would endure hours of unimaginable fear and uncertainty. Inside the house, the woman found herself trapped and at the mercy of a man whose intentions were far from innocent. Slayton's home became a prison, a place where her every move was monitored and her freedom was stripped away. But while she may have appeared helpless, she was far from defeated. In a moment of desperation and sheer willpower, she waited for the perfect opportunity to fight back. When Slayton let his guard down, the woman took a step that few could even fathom in such a situation. With survival as her only goal, she bit off his private part, inflicting a devastating injury that left him writhing in pain and bleeding profusely. This was her chance. Seizing the moment, she grabbed the knife he had used to threaten her and fought her way out of the house. Her adrenaline-fueled escape was nothing short of heroic. As she stumbled out into the street, covered in blood and trembling with fear, she began banging on doors, pleading for help. Jacqueline Fair, a neighbor who lived across the road from Slayton, later recounted the victim's desperate cries. She was absolutely hysterical, Fair said, describing how the woman frantically knocked on doors in search of safety. Eventually, the woman found refuge at a nearby home, where the occupants quickly called the police. Meanwhile, Slayton, bleeding and incapacitated, was left alone in his house. When law enforcement arrived, they arrested him and ensured he would never harm another person again. He was charged with first-degree criminal conduct and kidnapping, crimes that finally exposed the depths of his depravity. This horrifying tale is not just a story of terror, but also one of unimaginable courage. The victim's determination to survive against all odds serves as a powerful reminder of the strength of the human spirit. Even in the face of unimaginable evil, she fought back and reclaimed her freedom. It's a story that leaves us questioning what we would do in such a situation. Would we have the courage to fight back? Would we find the strength to survive? One thing is certain. In her darkest moment, this woman found the bravery to fight for her life, ensuring that her attacker would face the justice he deserved. These are true stories of terror, loss, and horrifying truths that leave scars deeper than we can imagine. But here's the real question. What would you have done in their shoes? Would you have survived the nightmare? Would you have made a different choice? Or would fate have caught up with you anyway? Life is full of dark corners, some we stumble into without warning, and others, well, we never truly leave. Have you ever had an experience that still haunts you? Share your story in the comments below. We'd love to hear how you overcame. Or maybe you're still trying to. If these stories made your heart race, your mind wander, or left you questioning everything, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. There's more where this came from, and you wouldn't want to miss it. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and remember, the things that go bump in the night might just be closer than you think.